This horrifying image shows the aftermath of what should have been a joyous celebration, a wedding, turned into a bloodbath. Former Marine Chatrong Shukshuk stood at the altar, surrounded by family, friends, and the woman he was about to spend his life with. Guests noticed it. He wasn't beaming with joy like a groom should be. Instead, he seemed distant, lost in thought. No one could have guessed what was coming next. In a horrific turn of events, Chatrong snapped. He pulled out a gun and opened fire at his own wedding, slaughtering his bride, his in-laws, and several guests before finally turning the weapon on himself. But what could drive a man to commit such a monstrous act on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life? The truth behind this tragedy is more disturbing than you think. Let's dive in. The wedding took place on the morning of November 25th, 2023, at the home of 29-year-old Chatrong Shukshuk and 44-year-old Kanachana Pachatunik. It was a day filled with joy, celebration, and a feast shared with loved ones. The couple had been together for 3 years and had finally decided to make things official. As the night went on, the celebration continued with music, dancing, and drinks. But something about Chatrong's demeanor felt off. While weddings are usually filled with smiles, guests began to notice that the groom didn't seem as happy as he should be. His expression was tense, his movements rigid. It was as if something heavy was weighing on his mind. Around 11:30 p.m., the mood shifted. Chatrong suddenly stood up and walked straight towards the door without saying a word. The abruptness of his actions caught the attention of the guests, and the lively atmosphere dimmed. Moments later, he reappeared. His face was unreadable, his hand tucked inside his pocket. The room fell silent as all eyes locked onto him. In an instant, Chatrong pulled out a gun and opened fire. Chaos erupted. 12 shots rang out in just 20 seconds. A brutal, rapid attack that left people scrambling for their lives. Chanchana and several people nearby collapsed instantly. Screams filled the air. Glass shattered, plates crashed to the ground, and the once vibrant wedding party turned into a scene of sheer terror. As quickly as it began, it was over. Chatrong turned the weapon on himself and pulled the trigger. For a few moments, there was only stunned silence. Then, sobs and panicked cries of the survivors filled the space. Someone finally gathered the courage to call the police. When authorities arrived, they were met with a horrific sight. Overturned tables and chairs, broken bottles, pools of blood staining the dance floor. Guests, still cowering in corners, were too shaken to speak. Among the fallen were Kanchana, her 62-year-old mother, King Thong Chalo, and her 38-year-old sister, Kornapia Manat, all dead. Several guests had been caught in the crossfire, including 50-year-old Thong Nunk Hod. Police recovered 11 bullets from the scene. Video footage captured the grim reality, body bags lined up on the grass, remnants of what was supposed to be a day of love and celebration, now reduced to a devastating tragedy. But why? What drove Chatrong to commit such an unthinkable act? Now, Chatrong had a remarkable story. A former paramilitary ranger, he had served in Thailand's border patrol until an incident on duty cost him his right leg. His military career was over, but he refused to let that define him. Instead, he transitioned to working as a forest protector and later found a new passion in adaptive sports. With his strength and determination, he trained relentlessly in swimming and archery, eventually earning a spot on the 11th Siam Paragon Games in Indonesia in 2022. He competed in both sports, ultimately winning a silver medal in swimming, proving to the world that he was unstoppable. The wedding came at an exciting time for him just a week later. He was set to compete in another international parasports event, but those plans would never come to pass. His bride, Kanchana, was a successful beautician with a warm, outgoing personality. Despite being 15 years older than Chatrong, the age gap was hardly noticeable. She took meticulous care of her skin, and her youthful appearance often made people assume they were closer in age. She had been married before and had 2 children from her previous relationship. Though she and her ex-husband had gone their separate ways, they still shared parenting responsibilities, and she frequently visited his home to see their kids. This was a point of tension in her relationship with Chatrong. He struggled with jealousy and often felt uneasy whenever Kanchana spoke with other men. Even on their wedding day, the tension was unmistakable. Chatrong and Kanchana had argued, and according to multiple guests, his insecurities had taken center stage once again. Witnesses recalled that Chatrong had been drinking heavily, growing increasingly agitated. He feared that Kanchana would eventually leave him for another man. One wedding guest who had overheard their argument said Chatrong's face was red with anger, while Kanchana remained calm and composed. The topic of money had come up, and Chatrong wanted Kanchana to contribute part of the wedding funds to cover expenses, insisting that it was an investment in their future. But Kanchana refused, standing her ground. That refusal sent Chatrong into a downward spiral. He took that as a sign that she wasn't truly committed to their marriage, and that she had already planned to leave him someday. The alcohol only fueled his emotions, bringing up past insecurities, old wounds, and his deep-seated jealousy. With so many guests around, he had no choice but to pause the argument. But the emotions raging inside him had nowhere to go. Unable to calm down, he snapped. Without a word, he stood up, walked out of the wedding venue, and headed straight for his car. Investigators later confirmed that this was when Chatrong retrieved his gun, a legally purchased firearm. Having a military background, he had developed a strong interest in firearms and shooting after his discharge. But on this night, that interest turned deadly. A 70-year-old neighbor who lived near the wedding venue recalled hearing loud bangs late at night. At first, they assumed it was just firecrackers, a common tradition at Thai wedding celebrations. It wasn't until morning that they learned the horrifying truth. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the local community came together to grieve. Buddhist monks performed traditional prayers and rituals at the couple's home, offering blessings for those who had passed. On November 26th, a funeral service was held at Wat Luang Rat Burmurg Temple for Kanchana, her mother, and her sister, while Chatrong's body was transported back to his hometown temple in Phimi district. Another victim, Thong Nokontod, was returned to his grieving family and laid to rest at a separate temple. Amidst the mourning, there was a small relief. Bamrang Chatarat, the guest who had been critically injured, underwent surgery to remove the bullet and made a full recovery. He was one of the few survivors of a night that should have been a celebration of love, but instead became a horrific massacre. And what's even more chilling? This wasn't the first time Thailand has been haunted by the horrors of unchecked gun violence. Just days before this tragedy, Thai Prime Minister at the time, Srettha Thavisin, signed an order to freeze all new gun licenses for a year, a desperate attempt to get the country's rising gun violence under control. Thailand has one of the highest rates of gun ownership in Asia, with an estimated 10.34 million civilian-owned firearms. But here's the terrifying part. Only about 6.22 million of them are legally registered. While mass shootings aren't common, the country has been rocked by a string of high-profile massacres in recent years, each more horrifying than the last. One of the deadliest happened in 2020 when a soldier in Nakhon Ratchasima went on a rampage, leaving 30 people dead in his wake. It all started over a land dispute, but the violence escalated into something far more horrifying. First, he murdered his commanding officer. Then, he raided a weapons stash, arming himself to the teeth before storming a crowded shopping mall. What should have been an ordinary day turned into a war zone. Surveillance footage captured the chaos, terrified people running for their lives, gunshots echoing in the background, a place that should have been safe turning into a war zone. But what made this massacre even more disturbing? The killer documented it in real time. He posted chilling updates on Facebook while carrying out the attack, as if it were some kind of twisted game. In one video, he held up a rifle and wrote, "Tired, I can barely move my fingers," as if slaughtering innocent people was just another task on the list. His social media page was eventually taken down, but the damage was already done. The nightmare dragged on for hours, from 3:30 p.m. until 9 a.m. the next morning, before authorities, with the help of the military, finally put him down. But Thailand's descent into horror didn't end there. 2 years later, the country would face something even worse. October 6, 2022. This day started like any other. At around 11:24 a.m., 34-year-old Panya Kamrab got into his white pickup truck and drove toward a small nursery in the Nong Bua Lamphu province. By 12:50 p.m. he arrived. Kamrab wasn't just armed, he was ready to destroy everything in his path. But the true horror unfolded inside. The staff barely had time to react. At least 3 teachers were killed in cold blood, including one who was 8 months pregnant. Some workers managed to flee, running for their lives, but for others, there was no escape. After the initial bloodshed outside, he stormed into the nursery's sleeping room, where dozens of young children lay curled up on their mats, deep in their afternoon nap. They never woke up. Armed with both a gun and a knife, Kamrab slaughtered them where they slept. By the time the nightmare ended, the bodies of 19 boys and 3 girls were found inside the nursery. 2 more, an adult and a child, were discovered at a nearby government office. But even that wasn't enough for Kamrab. The carnage continued. He fled the scene in his white pickup truck, tearing through the Nong Kong Si district like a demon unleashed. He shot at random, killing 7 more people. He struck and killed another victim before finally heading home. Once he arrived, the final act of horror played out. Kamrab doused his truck in petrol and set it ablaze. Then, with the same merciless intent he had shown everyone else, he turned on his own family. His wife and stepson, who by sheer luck hadn't been at the nursery that day, were both killed. And then, as if trying to erase even his own existence, he ended his own life. When officers arrived at the scene, they were met with a massacre unlike anything Thailand had ever seen. By the end of it all, 37 lives had been stolen, including at least 24 children, some as young as 3. Another 10 people were left seriously injured. Authorities confirmed that most of the victims had suffered a combination of gunshot and knife wounds, proof of the sheer brutality of the attack. But the question remained, why? To this day, no one truly knows what pushed Panya Kamrab over the edge. But the warning signs, they were there, clear as day. At one point, he had been someone people were supposed to trust, a police sergeant, a protector. His career started in Bangkok back in 2012, but when he was transferred back to his hometown in Nong Bua Lamphu, everything started to unravel. Even his own mother admitted, this was when the darkness took hold. Kamrab fell into drugs, and from there his behavior became more and more erratic. In January 2022, he was arrested for possession. By that time, he was also receiving treatment for mental illness. He was fired from the police force in either late 2021 or mid-2022. Then came the final breaking point. On the very day of the massacre, he had just left a court hearing for drug charges, with another one scheduled for the next day. His life was in freefall. His personal life was just as messy. His marriage was in shambles, his finances were a wreck, and his reputation was in the gutter. Those who knew him described him as unstable, short-tempered, and downright dangerous. One time, he reportedly threatened a bank manager with a gun because he had been caught sleeping on the job as a security guard. He fought constantly with his wife, allegedly over an affair, and even got into it with his neighbors over wild, disruptive parties. On the morning of the massacre, he and his wife had one last heated argument, and then he snapped. Like Chatrong, the infamous wedding shooter, Kamrab legally owned the 9mm pistol he used in the attack. But here's the eerie part. Despite his history of drug abuse, toxicology reports confirmed he had not touched any substances in the 72 hours leading up to the massacre. No drugs, no high, no altered state of mind. Just pure, calculated destruction. And as the dust settled, the true horror of what had happened became clear. Parents, grandparents, entire families stood outside the childcare center waiting, praying to reclaim the bodies of their children. But what they got instead was unbearable grief. One grandmother who lost her 3-year-old grandson in the attack couldn't even process it. When I heard the news about the shooting, I just fainted, she said. Another woman was hit with an even crueler fate, losing both her grandson and granddaughter in the massacre. I am full of such pain and anger because I cannot do anything, she said, her voice shaking, her world shattered. For many, there was no making sense of it, no logic, no answers. A young woman, still reeling from the loss of her 2-year-old nephew, Captain, kept asking the same questions over and over again. Questions that had no good answers. Why did he take it out on the children? Why kill them when they did nothing to him? And then there was Komsan Norabu, whose pain went even deeper. His ex-wife had married Kamrab, and now both she and her 3-year-old son, Warafat, were dead. The moment the truth hit him, it felt like the air had been stolen from his lungs. His little boy, the one who never stopped talking, who had his whole life ahead of him, was gone. And now all he could do was wait, just for the chance to see his son's face one last time. And when that moment finally came, it was more than anyone could bear. Rows of small pink and white coffins lined with gold filled the room. The children's bodies had been taken to a hospital morgue in Udon Thani, where they lay side by side, silent, lifeless, futures stolen in an instant. It was a tragedy that should have never happened, and yet barely a year later, Thailand would face another nightmare. October 2023, Bangkok, Siam Paragon Mall. A 14-year-old boy walked into one of the city's busiest shopping centers, a place packed with tourists, families, and everyday people, and opened fire. 3 people were killed. Several more were left injured. The shooting erupted at 4:10 p.m., sending chaos throughout the mall. Screams, panic, blood on the floors of a place that should have been safe. The shooter? Just a teenager from a nearby private school. Later, he told police that he had been hearing voices. He also believed someone was about to attack him, so he took out his modified Glock 9mm pistol and started firing. That gun? It wasn't supposed to be lethal. Police revealed that the teenager had altered a blank-firing weapon so it could shoot real bullets, and when he pulled the trigger, chaos followed. People ran for their lives. Others hid, holding their breath, as security and police scrambled to evacuate the building by 4:45 p.m. Meanwhile, the shooter moved deeper into the mall, eventually ending up on the 3rd floor of the Siam Kempsky Hotel. That's where the police finally caught up to him. By 5:10 p.m., the attack was over. He had run out of bullets. He surrendered without a fight. When officers arrested him, the scene was almost surreal. Just a long-haired teenage boy wearing glasses, a dark shirt, khaki cargo pants, and a baseball cap with an American flag stitched on it. He still had a handgun. He still had ammunition. But the killing spree had ended. In total, he had fired at least 40 rounds. 11 of those hit victims. The mall was left damaged. Lives were shattered. As investigators dug deeper, an unsettling picture emerged. The suspect had been diagnosed with a mental illness, but had stopped taking his medication. At school, he was struggling, bad grades, bullying, isolation, and when his parents pressured him about school, he'd have a chilling response. He'd send them videos of himself at a gun range, shooting at targets. Then on October 6th, his family finally broke their silence. They issued a public apology, promising to take full responsibility and cooperate with the investigation. But the damage had already been done. The shooting reignited a firestorm of debate in Thailand. People were outraged. Conversations about gun laws and firearm accessibility exploded across the country. How had this teenager gotten his hands on a weapon? How many others were out there waiting to snap? The questions kept piling up, but the truth was undeniable. Unless something serious changed, this wouldn't be the last time. The cycle of violence wasn't slowing down, it was only getting worse. So what do you think about these heartbreaking tragedies? Do you think tighter gun laws could actually stop people like Chaturang? Or are some individuals just wired for destruction, finding any means necessary to carry out their darkest impulses? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you thought that this was shocking, trust me, we've got plenty more where that came from. Check out our other deep dives into twisted true crime stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update.